We bring in Kellyanne Conway, former senior counselor to President Trump and author of Here's the Deal. And now, as of today, we welcome her as a Fox News contributor. It's always great to work with you, Kellyanne, and great to have you with us here today. Thank you very much. I want to start with where President Biden was with that, because we all remember Hurricane Maria. We remember President Trump going down there. The government earmarked $65 billion in aid for the 2017 disaster and has only paid out $19.3 billion. But it says that the fixes are all temporary. The haphazard construction really has questioned that money and whether or not it actually went to fixing the problem. What do you say?
Well, and Joe Biden could have done something about it in the 20 or 22 months that he's been president as well. So I'm really disappointed he would take a political pot shot on his way to go and help people in dire need. They need to rebuild their lives. And so disappointed to hear the Vice President of the United States, his deputy, talk about equity. That needed to be cleaned up by the press secretary, by the director of FEMA. Martha, the one thing you learn when you work in the White House is what we can all see, which is that Mother Nature is indiscriminate, and the aid delivery must also be indiscriminate. Everybody is suffering, and they need you, as the president, as the vice president of the country, to inspire and inform them, not to sort of corner and confuse them. So I felt the day after she was at the DMZ saying that we have a long-standing relationship and alliance with North Korea, she came home. Yeah, she came home and then made it worse domestically. And look, I have real concerns about her leadership because her words have such consequence and effect. These aren't throwaway phrases. We know that she's had 18 high-level departures from her senior staff. They have complained to the media that she won't read the briefing books, she doesn't study up, she doesn't want to learn, and then she blames them when she's caught doing that. We have not seen improvements in the ability of this vice president to lead or to give us any kind of comfort about her, have confidence in her competence. And when you hear things like she said in North Korea, she said about equity being the way that we deliver aid, both of which are not true, are just false, I really question her ability to lead, and it makes me very uncomfortable.
I mean, I think it's interesting, you know, that there's so much focus on her, given that, you know, President Biden is the president. We heard his comment, you know, looking for Jackie Willarkey, who tragically was killed in a car crash. And, you know, really, there hasn't been a lot of focus on that, but it's just one of many instances. I mean, so you're talking about two people that you have big concerns about right now.
The country does. Let's just look at what the Democrats say in polling. A majority of Democrats say they don't want Joe Biden to run again in 2020. Do you hear any of them saying because we want Kamala Harris to be the nominee? No,
well, that's what I'm getting at. I mean, that's the problem. The backup plan seems to be faulty, and you know, whether you're a Democrat or a Republican, you're recognizing that, right?
This is why I feel like that's right. That's right. This is why many of us feel like sending fresh fruit and vitamins to President Biden. But seriously speaking, there are just so many crises, so much chaos in the country right now. Crime in the streets, inflated prices everywhere we look, and the Biden-Harris administration does not have the goodwill and the applause built up among the people. If you look at the new Monmouth poll out today, Martha, you see that laid bare. So inflation, they have a very good chart in the Monmouth poll, anybody can pull up. They have side by side how extremely or very important each issue is, and then right next to it, what Biden's approval rating is on that issue. Top of the list, inflation, 80% of Americans say it's very or extremely important. He has a 30% approval rating. Crime is number 2. They want this election to be about January 6th, abortion, climate change, and Trump.
Yeah, no doubt.
And America wants it to be about rising costs and rising crime.
I want to ask you about hurricane politics, though, because you can feel that there's going to be an effort to turn this against Ron DeSantis, that that there'll be a way to sort of figure out. We're going to talk to the sheriff of Lee County in a moment. This is the reaction from The View and some other venues that has started up with In Force. Watch this.
This is the quote from Governor DeSantis about climate change. Quote, "I am not in the pews of the church of the global warming leftists." This is what he thinks about climate change, and now his state is getting hit with one of the worst hurricanes.
Well, all he has to do now is open up his arms and receive federal money. Let's just be clear. That is the executive leadership. He's now got to go hand in hand to...
How do you see this all playing out, and do you think that it will potentially have any negative impact on DeSantis, who, you know, a lot of people expect to run in 2024?
Well, fortunately, people like Governor DeSantis and like me and many others are not even talking about the political ramifications of a natural disaster and the way it is being handled. I think we see a tremendous contrast this last couple of days, Martha, and Governor DeSantis and many of his emergency management specialists in the state of Florida on the ground versus Biden and Harris, who are at a black tie affair talking about equity or ignoring the cameras altogether, or in the case of Biden being, you know, the nasty jerk he's been to his predecessor on any number of issues. So if we're looking for a contrast in leadership, we've seen it. But I think it's too early to talk about how it plays into 2024. People are still underwater. They're still trying to rebuild their lives. And I'm very glad to see that. The other thing is they know how weak Biden is. People see him as a weak leader. They don't see him as competent. They don't see him as inspiring. So they're always trying to nick and cut down those who may challenge him, Donald Trump or Ron DeSantis. I think it's no time to talk about politics. People are suffering. And if I were the ladies at The View, I would spend my time talking about how to contribute, how you can help. Do they need clothing? Do they need donations? Do they need pet rescue? What is it that the people on the ground in Florida need from those of us not in Florida? How can we help? That's the best thing you can do when you have a platform like that to communicate to America.
That would be nice. There's so many other things I want to talk to you about, but we'll do it next time because you're a contributor. So you're going to have to, we're going to see you all the time, which I'm very happy about.
Thank you.
And you know, I mean, it's so true. They should spend time talking about those things. We should hear more about all of that. But the time frame that shortens to politics has sped up so dramatically in the last, 10 years that's where it goes automatically. Thank you very much.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.